Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural OEM Statewide PD&E Industry Forum. We'll begin the forum in a few minutes, and we'll be starting with some housekeeping, but we just want to give people a little longer to log in. So thank you so much for your patience and for your attendance today. All right, everyone, it is 1:30, so let's get started. So welcome to the very first OEM Statewide PD&E Industry Forum. We greatly appreciate your attendance and participation in today's events. I'm Siobhan. I'll be one of your hosts today, helping out OEM with the forum. And before we hand it off to DOT, we just have a few housekeeping items to go through. So, as you may have noticed, GoTo has a new look. So you'll find your controls on the bottom and right side of the screen. And to ask a question of the team today, go ahead and click the questions icon, which is circled on the screen, and type your question in at any time during the forum. OEM will be doing their best to answer all questions, including any that you've submitted at registration, either during their presentations or during the Q&A portion at the end. And there is also a chat window where we will be posting links during various points in the presentation. And here is the location for the questions pane if you're on a tablet today, as well as if you're on mobile. It's either on the top center or up in that top right-hand corner. And with that, let's begin the forum. Catherine? Catherine, Catherine, you're muted. Just give it 1 second to unmute here.
Okay, I apologize for that, but hopefully that
There
was
we are.
the gremlin, and we're done for today on gremlins. So, so good afternoon. I'm Catherine Bradley, the State Environmental Development Engineer, and I want to thank you for joining us today on this our inaugural forum. This is an opportunity for FDOT and the consultants to build a relationship, or bridging the gap, if you will. So, as I mentioned, this is the inaugural forum, or what is intended to be the first of many. This first forum is the Office of Environmental Management, or central office centric, but our future forums are going to be more district centric. We'll have more updates on the districts and the district needs. So when you registered, we gave you the opportunity to ask questions on a few topics. We use those questions to help guide the information that we're going to share today. We also encourage you to put questions in the chat or in the questions during the forum, and we'll try to answer them as time allows. After the forum, we'll provide you with answers to the questions that we don't get to today. And just for your reference, this forum will be recorded and put on the OEM website. If you know anybody who missed it, or if you need to go back and learn anything that you missed today. So I think now we're going to have our first poll question. We'd like to know a bit about the attendees today. So take a few seconds to answer it. First one is, what size firm are you part of? I'm going to be very quick today. Looks like most people are parts of very large firms. Let's looking to see if we're going to make it up to 70% on firms of over 200. So with that, in interest of time, we're just going to jump on to our next poll. We'll end this poll. And our next form, do you work for multiple districts, including central office, or do you tend to just work on one district? Liking the answers to this, looks like most of you work several districts. With that, I'll go ahead and end the poll. It looks like about 85% of you do work in multiple districts. So one of our hopes for today is to kind of introduce you to the other districts. If you are one of those consultants that tends to just work in one district, this will give you some ideas of what might be available in the other districts. So we'll go over the agenda. So the first part of the agenda is what's going on in EMO. That's going to be by our director, Jen Marshall. She's going to tell us some of the new things happening in OEM, some of the new rules and regulations that are coming up, and some of the new policies. The second part is going to be our districts. Each of them will have 5 minutes just to give us a very brief overview of some of the issues or concerns that the districts are having. Then we'll have a short 10-minute break, and this is a very we need to be very quick on that 10-minute break, so make sure you don't take more than 10 minutes. Oh, we have your voice. That's actually our co-chair of the ACEC's PD&E subcommittee. She's Sylvia Belkry. She's going to give us some information about the ACEC group. And then Katasha Cornwell from this office is going to give us tips, tricks, and tidbits for environmental documentation, and also some tidbits on our website. Then we'll wrap it up with general QA and conclusion. And like I mentioned, please put as many questions as you have in the question box, and the ones we can answer today, we will. Otherwise, we will get the answers out to you at a later date. So with that, I'll pass it on over to Jen Marshall.
Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to have this opportunity to chat with all of you. As Catherine mentioned earlier, it's very important to us that we really start connecting with our consultant industry. We know we haven't had as much opportunity to do that since the pandemic, but we recognize that we have a huge work program coming out, and we also know that given the current state of staffing in both with you all and both with us, we're using a lot of staff augmentation at FDOT, and we want to make sure that we're providing you with information for you to support the districts and DOT in the best way possible. So I'm going to give you an overview of things that have been going on. We will be providing this information to you after this industry forum. So if you don't get everything at once, don't worry about it. You don't have to screenshot everything. Sometimes I do talk like the wind, but as Catherine said, please do make sure that you put your questions in the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. All right, let's go on to the first slide, please. So I have been the director for the Office of Environmental Management now for almost 2 years, or a little over 2 years actually. And we have done a little bit of reorganization and we have some new staff in our office. First, I'd like to point out that the new State Transportation Resilience Officer resides now in the Office of Environmental Management, and his name is Tony Fry. Tony joins us from Washington, D.C., and we're very excited to have him on board and as a part of our group. We've also created a new section within OEM called the Business and Office Management section. Right now, Terry Cook is our new Senior Environmental Program Analyst, and this section manages all of the contracts, internal and external, that we have, take care of all of our office concerns, and just really make sure, because we have really so much going on agreement wise and such, that we keep all of that together. So we're really excited about having the opportunity to have that office, that section created within our office. We have a new name, and I should have updated this. Instead of the Quality Assurance and Performance section, we now have the Process and Performance Management section, the PPMs. And our new State Environmental Quality and Performance Administrator is Jonathan Bennett. Jonathan joins us from District 1, and we're filling some vacancies within his group. We have two of our favorites, Tu Clark and Katasha Cornwell, who lead our environmental review and analysis sections. And of course, as you just heard from her, Catherine Bradley, our state environmental development engineer, who runs our engineering review and analysis section. We do have a handful of vacancies, like I said, but we have been very happy over the past year to raise up our staffing numbers. So we'd also like to welcome Robert Downey, who is a new attorney very recently within on our legal team, as well as Carson Zimmer, who has been with us, I believe, a little over a year. And then, of course, the person that continues to hold us down, Kathleen Tulin. So again, you'll have this in your packet when you receive it. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I want to start with updating you all on the NEPA assignment renewal, which happened last May. It was an intensive renewal process. I have to tell you, I started on it my very first day that I was on the job. And with what started as a very simple renewal process ended up being more intensive. And so I want to give you some highlights from that renewal. You're very welcome to request a copy of the MOU if you'd like to read it in its entirety for yourselves. We do have an annual reporting requirement for mitigation commitments, and that's not just mitigation for natural environment. It is any mitigation commitment that we make. And as you'll see, some of the other federal updates are building on mitigation tracking and commitments, et cetera. So this was just the first step in making sure it was in our MOU renewal that we're obligated to make sure we are following those guidelines as they go. Ensuring meaningful public engagement, including with environmental justice communities. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about environmental justice, but meaningful public engagement. One of the things that I want to say is here in Florida, we are doing an excellent job on public engagement when you compare us, especially nationwide. And although public engagement does not specifically reside as a responsibility of OEM, we do communicate very closely with the Office of Policy Planning to make sure that we are lockstep with what we're saying in our expectations for meaningful public engagement. The next one deals with Title VI complaints. So this was one that we had quite a few discussions with AASHTO and with the federal government. Should a Title VI complaint be made and accepted for investigation by FHWA, FHWA can take that project and reassume it from us. Now, that's something new. Of course, in the previous MOU, it states that Federal Highway can reassume a project for any reason, but they did choose to make a specific assertion that Title VI complaints could be a trigger. So that's something, if you hear us talking a little bit more about if you have a social concern or a Title VI concern on a project to keep us informed, that is why, because we want to be able to be aware if we need to brief the feds for whatever reason on whether or not they may be choosing to reassume a project. We want to be as involved in that process as possible.
Jennifer,
And
this is Jennifer Dorning. I want to stop you real quick. We got a question of what is a Title VI complaint? I thought maybe this would be something you could touch on real fast.
I could touch on that very fast. Title VI at the highest level talks about the access that we allow to specific populations. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I cannot recite to you what those populations are right now because I'm also reviewing the new environmental justice guidance and I don't want to get the two mixed up. But I will say that we have to make sure that we provide access to our projects based on Title VI to various communities. And if we don't do that, or someone feels that we don't, they can make a complaint to Federal Highway saying that we denied them the opportunity to engage with our process. And they can do that not only for what our phase is, for the NEPA phase, they can also do that for finances, design, construction, maintenance, contracts, you name it. So it's a very broad um, I'm going to say rule, but if I've misstated that, the lawyers will correct me at some point. So I will say that it's very broad in what it does, but specific to us for NEPA, if someone complains that we may be excluded a minority community, Federal Highway can choose to reassume one of our projects. To answer the next question that comes with that, the complaint has to be accepted for investigation, not just made. So someone can make any Title VI complaint, but if it is not accepted for investigation, then no, they won't reassume it. And even if it is accepted for investigation, that's not guaranteeing that Federal Highway will take that project back from us. So hopefully I got those two questions. I'm going to keep going real quick if that's okay with y'all. But if anyone is interested in hearing more about this specific area, please do let us know in the questions, because that's what we mean about having follow-up discussions where we can maybe have these more focused discussions on topics that you're interested in. The last item that I'm going to point out that was a pretty big change, it's turned out, for our program, and one that has been very beneficial is, I'm sure as you're well aware with IIJA, that federal grants can directly go to local agencies and don't have to come through FDOT. Unless there's a request for a LAP agreement. So for any grants that go directly to local agencies, the Office of Environmental Management will not be approving those NEPA documents. One of the reasons that we discussed doing that was to limit liability to our program. We all know that very often we don't know when an agency, especially if there's no LAP agreement, when an agency is getting funds, and if they're not funneled through FDOT, we don't have a mechanism to communicate with them. The Federal Highway Administration staff do. So we have worked very well with Federal Highway with regard to that. Now, if there is a LAP agreement present, then the funds come through FDOT. We have a nexus to engage, and so we do it. We can approve the document in that instance. There is one small exception to this rule, and if we can go to the next slide, I will say that we have agreed with Federal Highway that any agency who has not yet applied for the grant and is just looking to be federally eligible, OEM will still sign those documents. And we're working with Federal Highway in a way to limit some of our liability with that. We have partnered with the Office of Policy Planning, the districts, as well as Federal Highway, and provided in-person training on grant considerations to local agencies. We did that in person all from the beginning of last year. And we've developed an excellent relationship with our Federal Highway partners on how to transition projects should they have a federal grant or that local agency becomes a direct recipient. So we've already had a couple of those projects happen. Specifically, I can think of 2 in District 7 that just went really well. And so I think we have a pretty good process set up to continue on. When we're talking with local agencies about how they want to handle grants, we want to ask if the grant is the primary source of funding for them, because that helps us talk about, if it is, how do you plan to get there? When do you plan to get there? When are you planning on putting out your grant application? Because the minute they go in the grant application, we kind of cut those strings. We also want to make sure that we can connect with Federal Highway as soon as possible. And then we want them, if they do want to enter into a LAP agreement with FDOT, because they want FDOT to stay involved, that we allow enough time for all of that coordination, paperwork, approvals with boards, et cetera, to get finished so that we can meet the timeframes for the grant. We do have presentations from these meetings that we had with the locals available. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and we'll make sure that we get that information to you. Next slide, please. I know I'm going like the wind. You just may have to take that 10-minute break is just going to be recovering from me talking. Now, since April of this year, we have had more updates to NEPA related items than we've really had in like the past 20 years. So really most of my career dealing with NEPA. And so I just want to highlight very high level what they were. In April 2023, we got Executive Order 14096 that expanded the definition of environmental justice. So environmental justice is no longer just dealing with low income and minorities, that it has a broad breadth of who could be included in environmental justice analysis, and that we've been asked to look at direct, indirect, and cumulative effects analysis on those communities. We are going to be receiving, per the executive order, interim implementation guidance from CEQ by October of this year, with the final implementation guidance of October of next year. So that's just the time frame that we're looking at for that. In May 2023, the Supreme Court gave out the Sackett versus the EPA decision, which modified the definition of waters of the U.S. And just in August, actually, we got some additional information on that rule from EPA. So that's something else that we are monitoring. In June of 2023, with the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, there was a whole section in there regarding some updates to NEPA. Some highlights from that include class of action thresholds, timeframes, and page limits, many of which we've already heard. And then finally, just recently here in July 2023, the CEQ Phase 2 rule, where as I mentioned before, mitigation with commitments is taking a bigger view, right? So we're looking at enforceable mitigation, what the monitoring and compliance is that goes with that. Again, enhanced climate change and environmental justice analysis. And we are submitting comments on this through AASHTO, and those comments will be submitted to the Federal Register by the end of September. So this is a lot of stuff that I've just thrown at y'all. Just wanting to remind you that the slides and a recording will be available after this, so you don't have to rush and get screenshots. But just to go over with you all, this is a lot of change in a short amount of time. So what does it mean for us? Next slide, please. There are a lot of program considerations, but before I even go into those program considerations, I want to start by saying there are no immediate policy, program, or process changes going on for us at this time. And I'm going to tell you the reason is that we have a $14 billion work program. We are advancing projects at the speed of light, and we also have a very environmentally sensitive state, from a natural, cultural, to social environment, right? We don't want to be disruptive to our processes, and we want to be very thoughtful in what those changes are that we're doing. So we have been engaging with Federal Highway and CEQ in Washington, D.C. I do have some contacts up there. We've been coordinating with ASHTO, and we don't have to make any changes right now. So we are going to take our time, and as the changes, uh, as we need to make changes, we want to make sure that we are thoughtful in those changes, try to keep them as close to our processes as we currently have so that everyone can expect what's to come next. And we also want to make sure that we are able to update the PD&E manual in a timely fashion with the appropriate coordination, as well as providing training to everyone, so that we can make sure that we're following along as we should be. But I do want to give you some of the things that we are looking at for the program as considerations of things that may change. So with the class of action determinations, we do have 1 year for an EA, 2 years for an EIS. I know that is a point of concern for a variety of folks. So we're looking at our class of action determination process, when that happens, how we document it, so that we can make it a little bit clearer, again, and non-disruptive to everyone. So we are looking into that. Right now, I can tell you we're looking at making that class of action determination after alternatives analysis. That is not officially written anywhere, but that is where we're leaning to, and that the class of action determination will be the beginning of where we start the EA, etc. We are also looking at using EAs as decision documents for EISs, so we won't go directly into an EIS. We will start with the EA and move on. Again, more information on that will come as we get more detailed in that process analysis. We are looking at strategic scheduling discussions with our district staff. And that strategic scheduling is key because we all know as class of action rises, projects become more complicated. And so we need to be careful that we're not just rushing to get to the finish line, that we're looking at all of our commitments, we're doing all of the appropriate agency coordination, and that is going to take strategic scheduling discussions. And we are very open to making that work as we need to make it work. There may be adjusted documentation for both public involvement and SCE analysis, sociocultural effects. And as I mentioned earlier, we are looking at what the requirements may actually be for the additional tracking and reporting for mitigation and commitments. There may be the potential for additional oversight on local PD&E studies depending on public engagement requirements, because we know the locals do things a little differently, and how grants work into that. So again, we're trying to be very thoughtful, make sure we're working with the LAP office as well as our grant coordinators on the planning side to make sure that we are all on the same page and doing the same monitoring. We're working on right now, actually, I've started to engage Federal Highway about other agencies, permitting agencies specifically adopting our NEPA documents so that we can smooth out that permitting process. But if there's something that we can do in our process in the NEPA phase or in a reevaluation to help move a project along, we want to do that. And then again, looking at mitigation requirements. So this is all on our radar, but we don't want to throw a jolt to the system if we don't have to. So we want to be clear what the expectations are from CEQ and FHWA. Look at the risk to our program, assess it appropriately, and then get that information out to you all in a timely manner. Okay, next slide, please. So folks, I'm going to be real honest. I know I've been a whirlwind so far, but I'm going to kind of speed through a ton of the initiatives that we've been going through. If there's anything that you see in this list, and even after you receive the slide deck at the end of this presentation, please feel free to let us know, and we'll make sure that we have a more focused discussion planned at a later date for some of this. So from the Engineering Project Development Office, we are looking at updating for noise, especially the cost per square foot, updating with special land use guidance, providing some perimeter wall clarification, allowing that to be more of a mitigative item if someone chooses for it to be. Something that I'm calling a project development decision matrix, but really what it is looking at how we overlap PD&E and design, and really taking a deep dive into it to see how we make better decisions on how we overlap projects and why, so that we can make sure that we're using our information in the most efficient way possible. And that's going to be in concert with the construction offices and offices of design, because we do have phase design build coming through, as you all well know, as well as other alternative delivery contracts for construction that we need to be prepared for and see what flexibility we can find in NEPA. And of course, there have been some slip study updates that we will provide to you all as soon as we can. From the natural resources side, we have our minor projects programmatic agreement that has been very successful getting us through a lot of that coordination for minor projects. We are now, we've submitted our application and are working towards being a part of the Monarch Butterfly CCAA for when the Monarch Butterfly is listed. And we do have a new Panama City crayfish PA, which is really, really cool. District 3 took me out to go relocate some crayfish with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Katasha Cornwell and Denise Rock, and it was awesome. So we're very happy to have this relationship with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where we're able to develop these PAs. And I will tell you, in the past, we may have had some disconnect with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but I can definitely say within the past year, all the way up through their ranks, we have been seeing a great, vast improvement in our relationship with them. So if there's anything that you're interested in from a natural resources standpoint, please let us know. From the cultural resources standpoint, we are having new reviewers at SHPO. I know that that's very frustrating to some of you. It impacts our projects. We're trying to work with SHPO on workforce development, recruitment and retention, and providing additional training to those ETAT reviewers. So we appreciate your patience in that endeavor. We're just doing the best that we can to, support all of our partners while we're all going through workforce development issues. We hope to have the Section 106 programmatic agreement, the updated one, signed within a month. But now it's all with our federal partners. There may be a government shutdown, so that has made the time frame a little unknown at the moment. But I do want you to know it is on its final phase I'm so sorry, my brain just died, of approval. We're looking at the post-World War II structural resources, because we're going to have a lot of structures that turn 50 in a short amount of time. So we are working on how to approach that, and we will be getting that information out to you all as we can. And then we do have a curation project that we hope to be able to share more information with you at a later date. It is a very exciting project for us, and we're getting some social media interaction with it, etc. From a permitting standpoint, we again are working with FDEP for our ETAT reviewers for 404 to make sure we're helping them with training, workforce development, recruitment, and retention. We are pushing our SWEPT interface with permitting a lot more. We've already discussed this with our permit coordinators, and we're trying to work out some more regular coordination with the Army Corps of Engineers. We'd like to do the same with the EPA, because they really hold the keys to mitigation. And we are continually working on seeing how we can engage them more as time goes on. All right, next slide, please. All right, so I know there's been a lot of questions coming to us about sociocultural evaluations and public involvement, and I'm just going to say that all of those updates are in progress, and we're working with the Office of Policy Planning on that. We want to be very thoughtful about how we put out new guidance, especially when I mentioned to you earlier about the Title VI complaint issue item in our MOU. We just want to make sure that whatever we do is not only good for our communities, but also allows the appropriate risk for the department. And also, we want to make sure that we allow for innovation for communicating with the public for our consultants, right? We want to still stay on the edge of making sure we're doing the best communication possible with our communities. From an ETDM standpoint, we're getting a manual update and a public website refresh. We are also in the process of updating our ACE process. Right now, we're going to stick with what we have written, but we're trying to see if we can clarify and update that. So So you may see some information on that coming out. And we're also in development of an EA form that's going to be in SWEPT, that maybe I've asked for it to be kind of similar to the type 2 form, but that will be, it's in development and it will be coming out soon. And finally, we have, we at OEM are really, one of my goals as director is to really uplift and um, what we do as environmental professionals within the department, and project development professionals within the department. So you'll start to see from us some branding coming up. We had last year our environmental week, which also included our NEPA assignment birthday, 5 years NEPA assignment, 20 years of the ETDM program. We're starting to do targeted campaigns, and you'll start to see some of those campaigns coming out towards the end of the year, specifically dealing with the Panther. We have, again, our curations projects, which we internally call History's Mysteries, and other campaigns so that we can show the breadth of how environment really does shape our projects and how we as professionals are making holistic decisions. We're trying to put out more education, work on recruitment and retention, not only for us at OEM, but also for our districts and just for people in general to be more interested and educated in NEPA and permitting. And then you'll also see that we're trying to become fresh and funky, so to speak, with some website and SharePoint updates. And, you know, how fresh we can be still remains to be seen, but we are trying to give all of that a facelift. So like I said, I gave a lot of information in a very short amount of time, but please feel free to take time after this is over to digest this. Let us know what you'd be more interested in engaging with us on. We can set up some more virtual meetings. Maybe we could even in the future put out some more in-person things for both consultants and DOT staff so that we can make sure we're remaining on the same page and collaborating together. I finished 2 minutes ahead of time, but right now, I don't see any questions.
I think you
Oh, I see
covered
one
you.
question.
Yeah, I think two answered it, or two said she would get back with them
Okay.
after the webinar. So
Okay, awesome. So I don't see any other questions here, but if it's okay, in the spirit of partnership, we'll go through the highlights of some of our district needs. So first we have up the Turnpike.
Thank you, Jennifer, and good afternoon, everybody. I am Anne Marie Hammond, and I'm the newly appointed Environmental Administrator for the Environmental Management Office here at the Turnpike. Also with me today is Rax Jung. He's our Project Development Engineer. And I'll do a quick run through of some of our top needs here at the Turnpike. One of the things that we need are more consultant firms with relevant PD&E and limited access facility experience with innovative ideas and well thought out recommendations. We really want to welcome a bigger pool of consultants that with this kind of experience and the ability to effectively execute the job. We'd like to see more different firms pursuing PD&E projects with us, and is not necessarily limited to a geographical area. So for example, if a project is in the central part of Florida and you're a Tampa firm, for example, you certainly put your hat in the ring. But it's definitely want to let you guys know that please, consider us if you have interest in our projects. We have an important need for consultants who can evaluate multiple alternatives and provide innovative recommendations based on solid data and information for the Turnpike's consideration. And we especially need consultants who can confidently demonstrate knowledge of the project scope and the ability to perform the PD&E studies. In other words, you need to do your homework on projects. Along with that, we like to see the firms do some more succession planning and training of a new generation of PD&E professionals, especially with PD&E project managers. I know many of you are doing that now, and we try to do that here at the Turnpike. And then finally, we would like to have fresh support on the constantly evolving world of local, state, and federal permitting rule and regulation changes. As Jennifer Marshall spoke earlier, there are many new changes in federal rules, such as the WOTUS rules that you saw earlier. Also, we hope that firms have a clear understanding of water management district policies, for example, Some water management districts have a new position on conservation easement impacts. In fact, they don't allow that. And relationships are really important. Firms that need to have a strong working relationships with all these agencies, all federal, state, and local, and really understand what their reviewers require in their permit submittal. And that wraps up my report. I'm here to take questions. Also, RACS is available as well. Thank you.
Anne Marie, I'm not seeing any questions for the Turnpike, but if we do come up with any, we'll make sure to engage you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Turnpike is one of our most efficient districts, and Anne Marie did finish in about 3 minutes. Next up, we have our number one district. And do we have the representative from District 1 ready for us?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Abra Horn. Can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yes, Abra, we can hear you.
Okay. Unfortunately, I had a snafu with the camera, but I got all dressed up and fancy for nothing. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our needs in District 1. I am Abra Horn, the environmental administrator. And Jennifer, you will be happy to know that we are just about fully staffed up again. So we're pretty excited about that. So the first thing I'd like to mention in terms of our needs in District 1 is we'd like consulting firms to propose innovative strategies to meet or beat the challenging production schedules within the items that Jennifer outlined earlier in this meeting. The second thing that we're hoping to get is really important for our perspective, and I think for OEMs as well. We'd like to see consultants producing quality documents and displays that meet the regulatory requirements and FDOT preferences while telling the story of how transportation improvements will achieve community success. And finally, we'd like to have consultants help us provide expertise for environmental agency coordination and development of acceptable and innovative solutions for protected species, surveys, and mitigation options. And that's all I have, unless anyone has questions.
Thank you very much, Abra. I am not seeing any questions for District 1 right now, but of course we will re-engage you if we do see that any questions come up. And thank you so much for being and representing, being from and representing the number one district. Going now to District 2, I see that we have Terry Newman available. And Terry, you're not the number 2 district, you're an awesome district. So here we go for y'all.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of items that we recognize that, everybody is tremendously busy and we have all these projects coming through. But one thing that we would like maybe a little more assistance on is the planning consistency and the awareness of the time frames when we need those projects update to funding or project limits. These are multi-year projects, and often the next phase is funded and the funding changes due to, the changes in economics throughout the state. And those things have got to be worked through, both the STIP and the TIP with the MPOs and TPOs. And when we just need that assistance in making those changes for the plans. Another item is a need for experienced environmental staff, and the same thing for DOT. We're looking to try to find a balance in terms of we do have a lot of engineering folks, and we wouldn't be where we're at without those, but more environmental staff and getting that experience through mentoring. I know that central office has put together this annual training program for the PD&E manual, and if you have a need, perhaps that you could get into that as well. I believe the next one starts in January. But we find, some of the environmental staff are not familiar with our territory, or not familiar with our species. And if, some of the data shows that, you need to include this in your area, and we know that that is not a species that is in our area. So we just need to have that additional experience and at least some mentoring and discussions and information right up front. Third item is quality assurance. Use of that systematic, consistent measure to ensure your documents, your information is presented in the way it should be, to make sure that processes, techniques, and approaches are appropriate, and maybe coming up with a initial kickoff meeting on how that is going to be implemented. I think that we just sometimes don't go as far as we need to in the quality assurance, and we maybe get some things that we're a little bit concerned about in terms of reports, and then that follow up on how we get that information to you. And I think it's all about communication. What can we do better to communicate what we need, and also how you're going to implement that quality assurance for us. And that's all I have for District 2. I can take some questions if there are any.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
I am not seeing any questions for District 2. We'll circle back around with you, but thank you so much for sharing your list with us.
Appreciate it.
And now moving on to District 3, our sweet sister to the west in the other time zone, and also where we central office reside. We now have Sherry to talk about their needs.
So good afternoon, everyone. Hope you've had a great Monday so far from Panama City, Florida. Starting with our 3 district needs, starting with noise. We're in need of good consultants with good experience in noise modeling, which includes, good traffic and sufficient design information, including roadway information good information about roadway footprint, noise reflector locations, roadway and receptor elevations, and also anticipated right-of-way acquisitions information. Our recommendations for our consultants are to be familiar with FDOT's PD&E manual, the noise handbook, FDOT noise training, and also early coordination with your district noise specialist. Also, it's very helpful to have feedback from the community regarding traffic noise receptor concerns. Our second concern for our district is Section 4F knowledge and experience. We need experienced cultural resources staff to identify properties and features protected by Section 4F, which mostly includes public parks, publicly owned recreational areas, wildlife or waterfowl refuge, and also National Register of eligible historic places located within the vicinity of our projects. So we need consultants with experience with Section 4F for the tool in SWEPT. We need them to be familiar with the PD&E manual and also Section 4F requirements and Section F4 resources, and also consultants with FDOT and District 3 experience. We need consultants to also have specifically experience with tribal consultation and also preparing the letters. So we recommend FDOT Section 4F training for the consultants, early coordination, and also early coordination with your district cultural resources specialists, and also any feedback that you can get from the community and stakeholders regarding cultural resources concerns. And our last and not least bulleted item is our QA/QC of documents. This seems to be, I guess, district-wide. So we really would like to see good QA/QC implementation. And many guidelines and procedures have been implemented both by our district and OEM to have these issues, to improve actually this process. Now, D3 requires QA/QC documents to be submitted for all technical reports submittals on ERC. And also, OEM has created guidelines and checklists for QA/QC for a lot of documents, for some documents that including such as the type 2 CEs, PERs, and reevaluations. Our recommendation to our consultants is to visit the PD&E manual for helpful supporting resources, guidelines, and checklists, and also share them with their staff, counterparts, and sub-consultants who may also need to be aware of these resources. And I guess with that, that kind of brings my presentation to an end, and I'm ready for any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Sherry. It's great to see you. I am not seeing any questions right now for District 3, but thank you so much for sharing all of that information with us today.
Thank you so much.
We're now going to move to the complete other side of the state, where we're going to go now to District 4, and we have Chandra Davis, who is going to share with us some of the needs and requests from District 4.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everyone. Real quick, I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but I promise you it'll be done within 5 minutes. So during the consultant selection presentations, we would like to see more of a focus on the DOT compass. And for those who, some of the items you've forgotten, it's safety, communities, resiliency, workforce development, robust supply chain, and technology. And being able to link these projects, the project improvements, to addressing and seeing the benefit of your project when it comes to these items. In doing so, also demonstrating a balance of engineering, environment, and public engagement expertise to clearly convey that message in the consultant selection presentations and not just stating the terms. To the next bullet, we appreciate when avoidance and minimization efforts regarding environmental resources are demonstrated by the PD&E consultants. Again, not just the use of the terms, but showing a proactive approach when developing alternatives. Bottom line, no shortcuts. Also, understanding that noise is a highly specialized area of expertise, we would like to see more diversity in firms providing individuals with this knowledge and expertise and the ability to perform, similar to what District 3 was just speaking of. And lastly, I'm not going to go through exactly word for word for slide 3, which is some of the major projects that are coming up, but we encourage you to continue checking the professional services master schedule for upcoming advertisements, whether they're projects or contracts, but also to take advantage of marketing meetings. We often schedule these about a month ahead of the advertisement. And the benefits of these meetings are to meet the DOT PM, it's TRC members. It's an informal, usually 30-minute meeting. You're able to ask questions, have a better understanding of the scope and the department needs, and to help your team focus their letters or presentations. And with that, we're done.
Thank you so much, Chandra. I am not seeing anything from the questions for District 4, but we do appreciate all this good information that you've provided today.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going back to the middle of the state to District 5, where we have Casey Lyon, the new environmental manager for that district, here to share with us about them.
And just making sure you can hear me, since I had technical difficulties and had to call in.
We can hear you.
Awesome, wonderful. So my name's Casey Lyon. I'm with District 5. I'm the environmental manager, and I'll go through some of the things that we've noticed for our district. And Jennifer Marshall touched on this earlier, but we just want to make the community aware that the State Historic Preservation Officer's requirements for content and format of cultural resource assessment survey reporting related to documentation of ineligible resources. All architectural resources need to have a write-up with an explanation of evaluation and effects within the body of the report. And I know that's a lot to say, for this short presentation, but please reach out if you have any questions to your district cultural resource coordinator. They can provide assistance as needed so that we can make sure all our cultural resource management firms are aware of this recent guidance. And so communicating our project to the public and building trust is critical for our district. We are looking for an increased output from our consultants when it comes to public involvement including 3D graphics and any new methods that may convey project details more effectively. I say this, our consultants are doing a really great job with this. We're just looking for more and more as our projects get more and more complicated, it seems. And just wanted to make sure everybody's keeping an eye on our consultant acquisition plan, as we have multiple district-wide and continuing services contracts coming out over the next few months. And that's all I had.
Thank you so much, Casey. Appreciate it. And as Casey said, that was detailed what she said about the cultural resource information, but you will have this information that comes to you. And please feel free to reach out to the district for additional information. Thank you for bringing that up, Casey. We really appreciate it. And now we're going to go back down south to District 6, where we have Mauricio Gomez, who is going to share with us some of the needs from District 6.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for taking the time and attending this excellent presentation that OEM is sponsoring for all of us today. A couple of key items that I would like to bring on behalf of District 6. By the way, my name is Mauricio Gomez, Environmental Supervisor with FDOT District 6 in Miami and Monroe counties. First item is project management turnover, the importance of consultants remaining qualified. Regarding FDOT Professional Services Work Type Group 2.0 for project development and environmental study qualifications, it is important to consider the team and individuals who are certified in the case of any project management turnover. We have experienced in the past turnover in project management from consultants where the 2.0 qualification left with the prior staff. And never came back to be replaced for the team that actually stayed working on such projects. Another key point, a successful project, we all know, is the result of both engineering and environmental support from our consultants. PD&E studies and final design projects will further benefit from a joint effort, such as engineering consultants having an understanding of the environmental requirements, alike environmental consultants having a general understanding of the engineering processes. As we all might know, a PD&E study includes all aspects of engineering, environmental, and public involvement, such it is outlined in the 2.0 certification for PD&E projects. Another key item is that project managers should be familiar with all environmental requirements, such as the various regulations and procedures under the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, related to cultural resources, historical resources, contamination issues, noise-related activities, right-of-way, environmental sensitive areas, etc. Last but not least, in District 6, we're actually looking for more technical support related to the development of major and minor project schedules. As setting up these schedules, it really helps us create accurate and successful schedules, allowing the districts to reach production in an efficient and well-organized manner. The schedules really need to be developed with consideration to environmental activities with feasible time frame to review the engineering plans, develop technical reports, and conduct agency coordination as needed. And that's what we have on behalf of District 6 for today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mauricio. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Same here.
And now we're moving on to our final district, District 7, with one of my favorite people, Kirk Bogan, to share with us the things that are happening in District 7. Kirk?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, good afternoon to everyone. I just want to share 3 of our concerns here in District 7. The first is that we're looking for firms with journalists who may have specialists. We have people with specialties, but we want to make sure that those persons are not working in a silo, that they have knowledge and can assist in other areas and grooming them to know the entire process and how their specialty might impact other areas within the process. I think that's very important. And also, the second one, which has been founded on by District 5 and Jennifer, we just need help from our prime consultants and our cultural resources sub-consultants to help us to ensure that we are fully compliant with SHPO office requirements, as we know that they have been making comments about making sure that we follow the checklist that's provided by DHR. And so I think it's important that our sub-consultants and our cultural resource consultants would please pay attention to those requirements. And last, as we move towards more concise, compact documents, as mandated by the CEQ with our EAs and EISs, we also want to look at our type 2s and make sure that we are, the industry helps us to produce consistently structured documents. We do not pay by the pound. Amen. But we want to make sure that the documents in a concise way addresses the issues that we might be able to communicate that with the public. One of the things that we might suggest is that looking at hiring a professional editor to make sure there's consistency within our documents. It seems sometimes the documents are prepared in silos with persons with different experiences, but a professional editor could come in and make sure that we have a very consistent and structured document. And that's all we have here at District 7. Are there any questions?
Hi, Kirk. I am not seeing any questions specific to District 7, but thank you so much for all the good information that you provided as well. And I want to say to all of our districts, thank you for putting your thoughts together for this time for us to communicate to the consultants. I did ask them to keep it pretty high level, so because we will have another time where we can get a little more specific to district needs after after your CAP presentations. We want to make sure that we don't get into any procurement issues. There are a couple of questions that I do want to address. There were some questions that were submitted early in the process that asked questions about how do I break into a district? How can I, get selected here and there, et cetera? We can't answer any of those procurement questions, but I do recommend working through your district's procurement office for any district that you're interested in, getting in front of the district environmental staff, making sure you have a presentation there, looking out for projects that they have coming up, making sure that if you are pursuing a project, that you're listening to what your district is asking for specifically for your letters, for your presentations, etc. Every district has different needs. It's not just that they're different, they have different needs. And so we have to adapt accordingly to wherever we are in the state. So I strongly encourage you to increase your communication in that way, or maybe not increase, but improve communication in that way. We wanted to make sure that in this particular forum that we looked at getting the full gambit of firms, from small firms to larger firms. So we have a representation here so that you could all hear this message. And please look at the contact mailer and make sure you're getting these environmental updates. So when we have information, you're right on the front line of getting that information. Before I wrap up so that we can go to the break, we did have a question that asked about how will the new FDOT Resilience Action Plan affect the PD&E process, which is a great question because, as I mentioned, the State Resilience Transportation Officer resides in our group. And what we're going to do is really just integrate all that decision making into our project development process. We already have layers and tools in SWEPT for looking at projects in advance. We have a list of projects that the planning office and our resilience officer are developing so that we can look more holistically statewide at how we're implementing resilience. So we do have some tools and information upcoming. There will be manual updates with documentation requirements as we know specifically what those are. We're not going to rush, like I said, and try to just get things updated just for the sake of getting them updated. We want to make sure that we're coordinating with all the appropriate folks. So you will see those things coming. Hopefully in this session, you've seen some trends across the state for things that our districts are needing and that are interested in, and that you have a better perspective when moving forward and addressing their needs with your marketing activities as well as you are supporting the districts in general. So Siobhan, I shall now turn it over to you for our break.
Yes. So since it is exactly 2:30, thank you to all of our presenters so far for keeping us incredibly on time. Thank you for that. It's 2:30 now, so we will reconvene at 2:40. Thank you, everyone. All right, everybody. It is officially 2:40, so welcome back. And we will start our second set of rapid fire polls. So Jennifer Dorning, take it away.
Sure. Welcome back, everybody. We like to do this, give you a chance to sit back down, get comfortable. We have our first poll here on PD&E experience. We actually have 3 in this little section here. So what level of experience does your firm have with PD&E for FDOT? I'm going to give it a minute here because it'll show me the percentage, but I know that some people are probably just now getting back to their desks too. So we'll give this one a little bit longer. Still getting some numbers trickling in. All right, I think we can probably go ahead and close that one out. Looks like we're at most are at advanced. So that's very good. That should help. We all get to learn from each other then. All right, now the next poll. This one, I believe, is your personal PD&E experience. We're pretty even across the board here. Looks like we've actually got some people who are new at PD&E, so that's always good. That succession plan.
Yes, welcome.
All right, great. It looks like a lot of advanced, intermediate, and beginner, so we'd like to see it. And the last one we have here for our last poll. How often do you refer to the PD&E manual? I know some of us like to read it for pleasure. Looks pretty accurate. A few times a month, a few times a year. Some of us definitely daily, and some of us are new and just don't even, aren't familiar with it at all. So go ahead and end that one. So there we go. A little bit across the board, but definitely have some new people getting involved in PD&E, so that's always good to hear. And now I want to introduce Sylvia with ACEC, and she's going to tell you about some opportunities for involvement.
Hi, everyone. Great. So on behalf of ACEC, I would like to thank the OEM team for the opportunity to share a little bit about what our committee does. As Catherine mentioned, herself and myself are co-chairs for the committee. We meet on a quarterly basis. I think I have a couple of points, maybe on the next slide. There you go. All right. So we meet on a quarterly basis, and we are trying to hold at least one in-person meeting to coincide with the annual ACEC conference, hopefully to start next year. So some of the things that our committee takes a look at is understanding any issues or concerns that might be going on a statewide basis. Both sides, districts and consultants, identify any training needs, share any information for upcoming changes in legislation. So if there's any issues that you might have coming up, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone else that you'll see in the next slide. And you can go ahead and move that. Sorry, I put everything on one slide, so I didn't expect it to be broken out. I also wanted to let you know that these are the members representing on the committee from the consultant side. So each district is represented as well as OEM. And then on the consultant side, there are 8 members. We have 1 open position. We did announce that open position at the last quarterly meeting, but keeping in mind that Jennifer and Catherine had let me know about the statewide industry forum, I did want to extend the open position to announce it here today to give the chance for anybody who would like to be involved to get involved. So we're accepting emails to myself at sbeltre, that's SBELTRE at Ardura, ARDURRA.com. If you're interested, send me an email. We will keep the position open for the next month through the end of October. And then we will select and then have that person join us at the next quarterly meeting, which is in November. So it'll give you an opportunity to do that. And a little bit more background information on the committee. It is a 5-year term, so it would start with 2023 and extend through 2028 with rotations every 2 years. So we have one person coming off now, and a couple of years from now, we'll have another person coming out. So as I mentioned, if you're interested, please let us know. We'd love for you to join us and give us an email shout out between now and the end of October, and we'll take it from there. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you so much for that info, Sylvia. And now we will move to our deep dive session of this forum featuring Katasha Cornwell, talking about environmental documentation. And yes, talking about environmental documentation. So take it away, Katasha.
Thanks, Siobhan. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. The tips, tricks, and tidbits that we'll cover today fall under resources and tools, and then timelines. So we have a lot of resources available, but it can sometimes be hard to navigate our website. So we want to make sure that you know where to find what you need. And many of these resources will touch on the needs that you heard the districts talk about earlier. Everyone obviously is production oriented as well. So we want to make sure timelines are clear and that everyone is aware of potential stumbling blocks along the way. Next slide, please. To start, we'll look at our training landing page. And I know we had a question about this earlier, and you may be seeing some more links coming in through the chat. OEM and DOT in general offer a lot of on-demand training. And once you get to this page, you can scroll down to find the OEM training tracks. So if you can click twice for me. So here we have 7 different tracks. I'd like to note that some of the tracks have resources beyond just OEM recorded CBTs. So for example, track 5 includes recorded webinars on Army Corps permitting, essential fish habitat, our most recent endangered species consultation training that we did jointly with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service last year. FWC's provided a lot of trainings on several different species, and the OEM Kara and sand skink survey videos are also in that tract. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at areas that are relevant to everyone here today. So if you can click twice for me, please. All right. The project development and environment process. You can see here that we have our NEPA 101 series. This is a great background for people who are new to NEPA or that maybe need a refresher. And then we also have CBTs for most of our Part 1 manual chapters. And then one more double click. All right. Last, we have our CBTs for most of our Part 2 manual chapters as well. And you'll note that the dates on some of these might be a few years old. So while most of the basic information in these CBTs is still relevant and provides a really good foundation for learning, please be sure to refer back to the most recent version of the PD&E manual itself to confirm the latest analysis and documentation requirements or any other potential changes in law. Next slide. So speaking of the PD&E manual, again, through that poll, it looks like a lot of folks use this on a fairly regular basis, but maybe some folks don't use it all that often or maybe aren't aware of it. So this is the landing page for the PD&E manual. Again, you should be getting a link to this in the chat. We have easy access here to individual chapters on this page. You'll also notice that the manual chapters that have CBTs also have a link right to that webinar for you here. If you scroll down on this page, next slide, thanks, you'll be able to find the entire PD&E manual or parts 1 and part 2 that you can open individually. One thing that I find tricky to locate are the bulletins that we issue. Bulletins are used for situations where an update to a process or procedure is required, and it has to be implemented immediately or before the next manual publication, so those can also be found on this page. And then let's go ahead and look at some of these supporting resources. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of resources here, but we'll cover 4 of them. The 2 QA/QC checklists, which you've heard mentioned already today, the Type 2 approval process, and the SWEPT file guidance. Next slide. So the Type 2 categorical exclusion QA/QC checklist is now required to accompany all initial submittals to the PDC and engineering lead as of the July 2023 PD&E manual publication. On the first page is just the typical sort of project information. And you'll notice the highlighted sections near the bottom right that kind of explain OEM's roles when we use the checklist for our side. Next slide. So I'll reiterate that all Type 2s are required to go through a QA/QC process. This is not a new requirement. It's just the use of this particular form and the submittal to OEM that's the new requirement. You'll see that this form includes the district's review first, and then the OEM review. The district review may be done by DOT staff, or it may be completed by staff augmentation or consultant staff augmentation. Some districts may also choose to request that the PD&E consultant use this checklist as well, but that's not necessarily a substitute for the district's own QA/QC of the Type 2. So these first few pages of the checklist have items that are relevant throughout the entire document or that are formatting type things. But then there's a few things I'd like to highlight here. First, the document should be written from the DOT perspective, meaning that the document should clearly state what actions DOT is going to take, either during design or moving forward. So for example, the level 2 contamination screening. The document is not meant to make recommendations to the designer or include recommendations from the PD&E consultant to DOT. The next item is just a tip to look at the standard statements that SWEPT already generates for you. There are help bubbles throughout the SWEPT tool, and generating a PDF version for the QA/QC process of your Type 2 should help identify where there's any inadvertent duplication of these standard statements. And then one thing that might seem like a hard habit to break, especially for those folks that have been around for a while, is referring to the PD&E manual chapters throughout the document. So as noted here, what we call the second cover page of the Type 2 already notes that the Type 2 was developed in accordance with the PD&E manual. So all of this QA/QC process that we're conducting and that we're talking about today really make sure that that statement is valid. So also by refraining from noting specific chapters, it helps to avoid situations where maybe chapter numbers or titles have changed between the start of the PD&E and the finish at LDCA. Next slide, please. All right, so we'll just touch on a couple more here. The first is that for the purposes of the environmental document, we don't need to know if Jane Doe with Verizon is the utility agency owner contact or if Joe Bob made a specific comment at the public hearing. Those details are really more appropriate for the technical documents, but we don't need those in the actual categorical exclusion. So this next one we kind of tend to think of we tend to see fairly often. Selecting enhance in the Type 2 for mobility is almost always appropriate, right? That's what we're doing here is enhancing mobility, but it's often hard to demonstrate for other issues or resources. So when selecting enhanced for a topic like economics, there needs to be sufficient documentation, plans, or other data that back up the selection. And if there's not, selecting no significant impact is okay and is appropriate. And last, the checklist does have a handy appendix that details what items are technical materials and kept in the SWEPT file versus what should be attached to the Type 2 itself. Next slide, please. So as you continue working your way through the checklist, it's broken down into each section of the Type 2 with specific items to check for that area. You'll note the comment boxes, so please use these if you have any unusual circumstances or if there's an item that might be outstanding for some particular reason. Next slide. The reevaluation QA/QC checklist looks very similar, and it's also required to be submitted with all initial submittals to the PDC and the engineer, again, as of the July 2023 PD&E manual. Next slide. And the layout here, again, looks very similar with reminders and items that are applicable throughout the entire document. Next slide. And then as you work your way through, it's also broken down into the different sections of the reevaluation. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've gone through the QA/QC process. The checklist has been submitted to the PDC and engineer. You've received comments back from OEM. What's next? Well, now we're in the comment resolution phase. For Type 2 CEs, you'll see here that we require two things, unless otherwise noted, which means you had a really clean document and there's just very tiny minor edits. The first is your responses to OEM comments within the PDF version of the document that we sent to you. We request that your responses be detailed enough for us to understand the changes that you're incorporating when our comments are more than just sort of editorial type comments. Maybe we're striking through some words or whatever. Providing us back meaningful responses makes the comment resolution process much more efficient. The second thing that we ask for is the clean version of the document. This allows us to see how the comments were addressed and to confirm that the updated version meets the intent of the requested revisions. Then you'll see that the slide notes that this process is for initial and final. So it doesn't really matter which process you're in. We want that those two things for both of those. The third thing we have here on this slide for type 2s is more of a request. If for any reason a change outside of the OEM comments is made to the document, maybe you noticed a mistake on your own, or some time has passed and maybe there's some more details available, maybe some more public involvement has happened, please highlight those changes so that we know to look at them. Otherwise, in order to keep things moving, we're pretty much focused on the sections of the document where the comments are being addressed, and we could overlook those new updates. Then moving on to the environmental assessments, we don't currently have a checklist that's required to be submitted to OEM along with that environmental document, but just wanted to let you guys know that when they come for initial review, we do prefer to receive the Word version of the environmental assessment. We've learned our lesson way too many times the hard way that the PDF and commenting on that with multiple people is just really, really painful. So we just want to let you guys know if that's something coming up on your radar, that the Word version is much easier for all of us to work back and forth in during that initial submittal, and then we can get the PDF during the final. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll just touch really briefly on this last tool, and then we'll move on to timeline tips and tricks. So if you haven't used SWEPT yet, or maybe it's been a little while, right, since you've had to populate the SWEPT file, we do have some guidance out there that might help you. This spreadsheet is 2 parts. This first tab really is just kind of an overview of the directions. And then the second tab, which I don't have a screenshot of, but it does kind of show you where to store different correspondence and information, technical materials, that sort of thing, and what the different references are to the PD&E manual chapters. Correspondence tends to be that tricky one. The people aren't quite sure where to put it, so this should help you and help keep things organized in your files. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to move on to timelines. And before that we dive into this slide specifically, I think it's important to understand the OEM review timelines for a couple of reasons. And I think you heard a couple of districts kind of touch on this to some degree. But when you're pursuing a project, knowing the timelines helps to make sure you're presenting an accurate schedule. The second is once you've won the project and you're trying to now bring it in for a landing, you want to keep from getting yourself too crunched at the end when you're trying to get LVCA. The OEM review timelines are sometimes boiled down to, oh, they have 30 days or, oh, they have 60 days. But the overall timeline really depends on the quality of the document coming in and the amount of time it takes for the district and the PD&E consultant to turn it back around to OEM. A lot of times that timeline isn't part of the schedule and it can create confusion at the end of the process. So while some district consultant teams have been able to turn responses around in just a day or less, that rarely happens, and no one wants to have to get stuck in the position of being that quick if they don't have to, right? You need to make sure you have the time for the QA/QC and the proper review. So hopefully chatting about this timeline will provide a little bit more insight into the process. All right, so let's focus on this slide now. This is kind of what some of us call the type 2 game board. These same steps are pretty much mirrored as you go through a review for reevaluations, as well as for environmental assessments and EISs. But those 2 higher level documents play the game twice, once for the public availability and once for the final decision. So the middle section represents the various roles playing the game. Then on the left, you can see the steps that the district take to get to the initial submittal. The bottom section shows the PDC and engineering lead steps that they take during the initial review. And I'd like for you to note that purple box at the bottom there with the 15 days for the district preparing the responses, which is oftentimes done in consultation and in coordination with the PD&E consultant. This is where you can run into trouble and kind of get bogged down. The 15 days is approximate. It's not tracked by OEM and it's not tracked by SWEPT. The district and the PD&E consultant have the next move here on this game board. We can't get to the next step until we hear back from you. So that next box, right, that we're trying to get to is that gray box at the bottom. And you'll see those circular arrows that denote the comment resolution process can take more than once if needed. This goes back to the quality of the responses to the comments and clearly showing the updates in the clean document. Last, along the right side, is the final submittal. You'll see that same circular arrow for the PDCs and the admins. And while we often don't see multiple rounds of comment resolution during this time, it can happen on occasion. But hopefully the final review addressing minor edits from the admins and the approval by the director all goes smoothly, given all of this QA/QC and the review process that has already taken place. Next slide, please. All right. We know PD&E schedules can be complex, but the level of complexity increases as we add the 106 adverse effects when you need that SHPO MOA, the individual Section 4Fs that you heard earlier from District 3. All those things make that tracking of the schedule much more complicated. So our cultural resource specialist created this spreadsheet for project managers to better track the process in these circumstances. The spreadsheet outlines required timeframes, so for such as ACHP, it outlines items that are at the district and the PD&E consultant's pace, and then it outlines areas under OEM purview where there may be opportunities to compress the schedule if agreed to ahead of time. So these are those areas where you guys may be able to find some innovations in getting those schedules met earlier. So this isn't available online, but it can be made available to project managers as you encounter these situations and need to be planning ahead. We've received a lot of positive feedback so far on this tool, and hopefully you'll find it useful. So next slide. Okay, we're closing in on these final tips and tricks. First, it's important to recognize that planning consistency reviews need to be completed during the initial review for type 2s and reevaluations. When planning consistency is not achieved during this review, it will need to be confirmed before the final submittal is made through SWEPT to OEM. And besides waiting on planning consistency, there's times when the comment resolution process takes longer than a few weeks or even a couple months. And as I noted on that game board slide, the time to respond to initial comments is not tracked by OEM or SWEPT. So when this sort of process drags on and it starts to create gaps in the review, additional comment resolution iterations can occur. In projects where several months to even a year or more, which does happen on occasion, unfortunately, if that long of a time has passed, you should expect a fresh initial review. Next slide, please. All right, so as we approach this finish line together and we're moving toward the final submittal in SWEPT, just a couple last reminders. The PDC has 14 days to look over the document one last time. If the comment resolution process has been completed recently, they typically can turn their review around within just a few days. But during that 25-day admin review period, we have to review the document, the admins do. We send it back for minor edits. The district and the PD&E consultant have to respond to those edits. The PDC backchecks it, and the admins then have to confirm. So that's a lot of steps in a short amount of time. And that clock doesn't stop, right? So I just want to make sure y'all know the clock doesn't stop in that 25 days. So we have to keep things moving pretty quickly. Fortunately, SWEPT does keep us on track to some extent. The PDC puts a date into the SWEPT tool to say when the minor edits are due back, and SWEPT does send out reminders. But again, we can't move to that final spot on the game board for the director's signature until we hear back from you. So occasionally, for whatever reason, comments cannot be resolved, or an outstanding item doesn't come in on time, and it runs out of the admin clock. So for these situations, the PDC will reach out to the district to request withdrawal of that incomplete document. And once that document is ready for resubmittal, the clock restarts from the beginning. Fortunately, though, most of the time, through good communication and coordination, we receive quality responses and updated documents are sent back timely, and we can reach that finish line together or to meet the project schedule or beat the project schedule. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Siobhan. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for all of that great information, Katasha. So we are now going to move to the question and answer portion of today's forum. So let's start with a few highlights from questions submitted at registration, and then we will look at any remaining questions from the chat today. So Jennifer Marshall, what is our first topic from the registration questions you received that y'all would like to cover?
I'm going to be honest with you, Siobhan. I was just going through all of these questions, and we have pretty much answered all of the questions throughout the presentation that folks submitted in advance. There were a couple of the procurement ones that I mentioned, i.e., how does FDOT assure opportunity is given to new consultants? How do you get engaged with providing PD&E services to FDOT? Those are items that you'll need to contact the district procurement offices for more information for those specifically. We did have some technical questions regarding who evaluates noise impacts for ATCs during the design build process, a question about the ICE process for PD&E evaluations. I will also say that those are probably should be directed specifically to the district that you're interested in. We do have information high level on ICE in the PD&E manual and in I believe the traffic operations manual, if that exists. But that's where that information um, exists. It's not the traffic operations manual. I'll be honest, I just can't remember which one it is right now. But some districts have a slightly different take on what their needs are, depending on where they're located. So you'll want to contact them directly. Um, but other than that, Siobhan, I don't see anything else that has come through.
Yeah, your team has been doing an excellent job answering questions as we were going in the chat as well. So thank you to and Katasha and Catherine, really, and Jonathan Bennett. Really appreciate your efforts there. There was one question I wanted to just bring up for the good of the group, that there was a question about whether there will be a game board type representation of EAs, EISs, and reevaluations. And the answer from the team is that that will be something to be considered in the future.
Yes, but we are definitely, as I mentioned when I spoke at the very beginning, we're really going to work on clarifying some of our processes, especially with class of action determination, how those specific timelines, when we're expected to begin and end, making sure that the Primavera schedules that we provide as a tracking mechanism is updated to reflect what our expectations are. And we're going to do that, but we're still, in the process of determining all that right now. I do see a question in the chat regarding species specific surveys during PD&E. And I'll say that what we're looking at in our project development process is to what end, what is your project needing, right? And I think that goes for a lot of things in our PD&E process. What does your project need? Are you trying to go to construction? Are you trying to complete a NEPA document and go to design in 5 years? Are you trying to acquire right of way? And that determines really what steps you need to take in your NEPA process in order to move forward with your project. In some instances, if you're in a highly environmentally sensitive area, we may talk with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and they want those species specific surveys, knowing that we're not going to construction for a while. That's a project by project determination. But if you're going to construction and then your project time frame is compressed and your NEPA document is also going to support your permitting documents, then of course you'd want to do the species specific surveys right then during your quote unquote NEPA phase. But that's some of the stuff that we're working on in our project development decision matrix, like I was mentioning. Like I said, I don't know what else to call it yet, but those are the type of things that we're trying to put together to better scope and set expectations for projects in the future.
Wonderful.
Oh, thank you. We had someone let me know that there is no traffic operations manual. It is the intersection control evaluation manual. So thank you very much. This is what happens when you've been in PD&E too long. I'm joking. It's good to be in PD&E.
Well, I think that is the end of the questions from today's live session.
Siobhan, I think I have a couple more. I did answer earlier, there was a question on resilience. So with resilience, we have there is going to be an update for the SLIP study once we get more information from FDEP that's going to be updated in the PD&E manual. We don't have that information yet. And the resilience team, which is a combination of our office, design, Office of Policy Planning, as well as technical advisors from throughout the department, are looking at developing project priorities with the resilience action. Oh, no, the RAP, the Resilience Action Plan that's coming up. A lot of acronyms, so if I've misspoken on that, I apologize. We have a new PSEE module that's coming out to help track resilience recommendations, and we do have another, we have tools within the environmental screening tool, ETDM, specific to resilience. It's going to help with planning for resilience and projects. We don't have anything formalized yet, so we're working with those folks to get that formalized and get that documentation expectations out to you all. But right now we do have all of these items in development.
And then there was a question that came in. It says some districts are working on alternative mitigation projects specifically related to environmental impacts. Traditional mitigation methods are great, but how open are you to additional options such as wildlife crossings that have potential to provide more or like better conservation benefits?
We appreciate creativity wherever it can lie, especially when it's going to result in a holistic solution. The key there, though, is making sure that our regulatory agencies are also on board, because they really hold the keys and the jurisdiction when it comes to those final decisions. So if you're wanting to do something out of the box, whether it be for mitigation, like the question asked, or for anything else, engage us early in the process so we can see where our potential roadblocks may be. Maybe there's something that we can do in your innovative suggestion, and there's some items that we can't because we're just not there yet. But specific to mitigation, we're open to being creative on our projects, but we do have to have buy-in from our regulatory agencies. And we are working on those relationships to strengthen them even further so that we can get there with them.
Wonderful, thank you. And then we had another question come in mentioning that some of the templates being used in District 1, and that they, from someone who has used them, I guess, and they were asking if OEM was considering developing outlines or templates for all standard PD&E reports. And they're saying that they're aware that some of those exist already.
We have prioritized some of our more critical reports. I think it would be, and out of respect for what the specific needs of our districts are, we don't like to dictate absolutely everything if we can help it, as long as the information that we need is present. However, if you all have a request, if there's something that you're really just struggling with documenting and you would like us to have some guidance and or a template made for, just please feel free at the conclusion of this forum, when you're giving your feedback to us, let us know, and we can take that into consideration, definitely.
There's also a question on some of the biggest challenges, like the top. Do you have a top 3 list of like the biggest challenges OEM is facing right now?
Yes. Schedule. Schedule is top notch. When our districts are pinched, you are pinched, and then we are pinched. And when we start to work outside too far of what our processes are, we add more risk to the program. And you'll hear me as we go through our time together, with me as your director and you all as our partners, you'll hear me talk about risk all the time. And I do that. If it's a low risk, we may be more inclined to do something. If it's a higher risk, we're going to take a second look at that. But when we're working outside of our process too far, if we're pinching schedules too much, then that adds risk to our program. So scheduling is key, making sure that within that schedule we can accomplish what we need to accomplish, and we meet the deadlines that we say we're going to meet. Knowing that, our consultants work for multiple districts. Our districts have a lot of responsibility, but then we at OEM, Katasha mentioned our 30 days or 5 days or 25 days, what have you. Within that time frame, we may not only have your project, we may have 5 projects. I know that there have been times within my 5 days, I have actually had 4 or 5 documents that I'm having to review and approve within that 5 days on top of all of my other responsibilities. So it's just keeping in mind that we all need to be aware of how our schedules impact each other. I would say recruitment and retention is big statewide, not just at OEM, but with our districts as well, because they are, especially when our districts don't have folks and they're augmenting with consultant staff, then we have to make sure we're communicating to you all what the expectations are. We also want to make sure that we're keeping competition as broad as it can be. So recruitment and retention, trying to get in and retain that information is a big deal. And we're looking at statewide succession planning. We have some amazing veterans that you have heard from today in this presentation that aren't going to be with us forever. We need to get their knowledge, their information, their advice, their everything, and that we need to make sure that we keep that information within our realm so that we can continue to be successful going forward. And I think the third, it's not so much, well, it is a challenge. It is elevating what we do within the department and within the industry in general. Environmental is key, right? It's where we actually touch the public and we touch our communities. And it's also where we authorize your federal funding. It's also where we make sure that all the documentation is put together for your projects. It is a very key area, but sometimes we can be looked at, some of you may have heard me say this before, as the killer of projects. We don't want to be the killer of projects. We want to be partners. We want to make all of the documentation and everything that goes with that analysis, etc., enhancing and beneficial to our projects in addition to meeting the rules. We want to make sure that statewide folks and NGOs and the public know how hard all of our environmental professionals work, what goes into our cultural resource information, what we're doing to help enhance the natural environment, how we're communicating with our communities. We do amazing work that we never talk about. And that's what we need to get out there. And that's a big push for our outreach and marketing efforts that we're trying to do from OEM. It's not just for our office, it's to elevate our whole profession as a whole.
That sounds yeah, I was gonna say that sounds less like a challenge than a quest, Jennifer.
I think Imran said he will never ask me a question again. That's a
But what
shout
a
out
great
to Imran.
question. Thank you.
He's awesome.
Thank you, Imran. That is, I think, do you have any other questions that you had, either from registration or ones personally sent to you that you would like to answer at this time? I think I'm out.
We just got one more.
Okay.
We just received one more. Is there a limit to how many local PD&E projects a local government is allowed to push through FDOT during a calendar year, et cetera? Did you see my quotes? Push through.
Gotcha.
All local coordination goes through our districts. And so that needs to be a conversation between the district and the local agency on what the workload they can handle, and how to get the documentation to the place that it needs to be. So that's more district specific type question on a project by project basis. Anything else? All right. Well, I want to take a moment and I want to thank our development team that supports us here at OEM for all the amazing work they do maintaining the environmental screening tool as well as SWEPT. I want to thank GeoPlan for all the amazing work they do being partners with us to make ETDM possible. And I want to thank our team here at OEM for being not only an excellent team, but being great partners. With everyone else. I want to thank our districts for all the hard work that they put out, especially when many of you have such a small crew of folks doing the work. Our districts are just really full of great energy, great knowledge, and we appreciate all the work that they do. And finally, to you all, the consultants who have attended today and who work with us on a day-to-day basis, we appreciate you so much for being our partners, and we can't accomplish any of this work without you. And so we want to share that appreciation and hope that we can strengthen the relationships as we continue to go on. We have such a strong program here in the state of Florida. You can see it nationwide. We are asked to present all over the place. Our projects are really featured well. We could do a lot more of that, hint, hint, but we have such a strong program. I want to make sure that I recognize our partners with our partnership with Federal Highway and with our other regulatory agencies. We're continuing to help those grow. And, please join with us, ACEC. To elevate and educate others about what we do so that we can help continue to grow, modernize, and make our program more efficient. A few of the takeaways that we want for you is there are resources out there for you to do documentation so you can have a better idea of what's expected for you when you submit to the districts. If there's something else that you need, let us know. There's a lot of change that's been going on at the federal level, but we are going to take a strategic and thoughtful implementation approach and make sure that the PD&E manual is updated appropriately, as well as offering you training on that information. And I think that's it. I want to also thank the Adkins crew that took their time to put this together, especially Siobhan Gale and Jennifer Dorning. They have been wonderful. And to conclude our forum, I do have one last poll question. Can we do the poll question? Yes.
We absolutely can.
Would you attend another industry forum if offered regularly? I did not scare you away with that download of information. Yes, I win today. So please make sure that you are engaged with Contact Mailer. We're going to put that information in the chat so that you can receive regular updates from us. And thank you for being a part of this inaugural PD&E Industry Forum. In the next few days, look out for a follow-up email. We'll have a few questions about upcoming events and topics you'd like to see covered. And if you had a question that was not answered, we'll follow up with you privately. Or, we can make sure to get some kind of a fact sheet out if we see that a lot of people have the same question. The follow-up questions can be directed to Siobhan Gale at her email, Atkins, I'm sorry, her email has been placed into the chat. And if you would like a copy of today's presentation or any of the other items from the forum, you can find it on the meeting and events page at the OEM website at fdot.gov. So thank you all so much again for your attendance, and we appreciate you so much. Have a wonderful week.